Footsteps. A true crime mystery nobody can explain. Before we begin, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and tap like if you're brave enough to step into the darkest corners of true crime. Because once you walk into this story, there's no turning back. The wind along the coastline was violent that January afternoon, tearing across the dunes with a hiss sharp enough to feel like a warning. Officers sprinted across the sand, radios crackling against the roar of the ocean. It wasn't a drill. It wasn't a false alarm. A pair of teenagers out for a walk had just found something half buried, something the wind should have swallowed but didn't. Even before the detectives reached the scene, they sensed it. That unmistakable heaviness in the air. A crime had unfolded here, and the beach itself seemed to recoil from the memory. Detective Colin Mercer was the first to kneel beside the shallow mound. The sand was disturbed in long, uneven strokes, as if someone had tried to bury the evidence in a hurry. He brushed it away carefully. And then he froze. A hand. Pale, small, motionless. Another officer shouted for backup, but Mercer's world narrowed to that one limp hand and the terrible truth that usually followed. He pulled back another layer of sand, and the second body appeared beside the first, both lying close, as if even in their final moments they clung to some silent hope. The victims were soon identified as two teenage girls who had gone missing earlier that day. Marianne and Christine. Best friends. Laughing, carefree, enjoying the last moments of summer. That morning they'd taken a train to the beach. Witnesses remembered them giggling, running toward the dunes, talking about nothing and everything. But by afternoon, they had vanished. And by evening, the dunes revealed the truth. Colin stepped back as the crime scene team erected barriers, but something in the sand caught his eye. Footprints. Not the clear kind that gave you heel-to-toe clarity. These were strange. Deep in some areas, light in others, as if whoever made them kept shifting weight anxiously. They traveled in a broken path behind the dunes, weaving left, then right, then abruptly stopping at a patch of flattened grass. No more tracks after that. As if the person simply disappeared. A witness approached, wrapped in a beach towel, shivering even under the brutal sun. She claimed she had seen someone earlier, just a silhouette near the ridge of the dunes. She couldn't describe a face. Only the way he moved. Slow. Deliberate. I thought he was following the girls, she whispered. But when I looked again, he was gone. Mercer scribbled notes, but every answer seemed to raise two more questions. Why this location? Why broad daylight? Why the strange pattern of the footprints? And why did they end so suddenly? Hours later, as the sun dipped behind the horizon and the shoreline turned a bruised shade of blue, Mercer walked the perimeter again. That's when he found the next clue. A small piece of torn fabric caught on a broken twig. Light in color. Maybe from the suspect, maybe from one of the girls during the struggle. Or maybe something else entirely. He placed it gently into an evidence bag. But what chilled him wasn't the cloth. It was the second trail of prints he hadn't noticed before. Faint. Almost erased by the wind. Smaller. Lighter. Leading away from the crime scene. A child's footprints. But there were no children reported missing. No children seen earlier that day. No reason at all for a child to be running from the dunes at the exact time the girls vanished. Mercer stared out at the sinking sun, a knot forming in his chest. This scene told a story, but not one that made sense. And then another officer called out, voice sharp with alarm. They'd found something else. Something buried under the sand just meters away. A notebook, damaged by salt and wind, but still intact. When Mercer flipped it open, his blood ran cold. Because the last page had a message scratched violently into it. He followed us. The notebook sat on the hood of the patrol car, illuminated by a single flashlight beam that trembled slightly in Detective Mercer's hand. Pages were warped from seawater, edges torn as if someone had tried to rip them out in desperation. But the final message, he followed us, was unmistakable. Sharp, uneven handwriting. A rush of fear captured on paper. Mercer scanned the beach again, replaying every footprint, every disrupted patch of sand, every path that led nowhere. But the worst part wasn't what he saw. It was what he didn't see. No drag marks. No obvious signs of a chase. It was as if the two girls simply walked into the dunes, unaware of the shadow moving behind them. Back at the station, investigators crowded around a large table covered in photographs. The bodies, the dunes, the footprints, the piece of torn fabric, the notebook. No one spoke for a moment. It was the kind of silence that only happened when even trained detectives struggled to make sense of the chaos. Detective Linda Harrow, sharp-eyed and methodical, leaned over the footprint photos. "These patterns don't match a single person," she murmured. "Two sets of tracks near the girls. One heavier, one lighter. But the lighter tracks, they're too small. Smaller than either of the victims." She tapped the photograph. Either we're dealing with a third person, or someone was watching them long before the attack. Mercer sat down, rubbing the tension from his neck. The witness saw someone. A man near the ridge. But she didn't mention a child or anyone else. He flipped the notebook to earlier pages. Doodles. Casual notes. Nothing alarming until the final page. Someone scared them enough to write this. That means the girls knew they were being followed. At least one of them did. Linda studied the torn cloth from the evidence bag. Light beige. Coarse texture. Not school uniforms. Not bathing suits. Looks like work clothes. Maybe canvas. Maybe something industrial. Mercer nodded, but before he could respond, a junior officer rushed into the room, breathless. "We got something. A family just called in, said their son came home crying. Said he saw two girls arguing with a man near the dunes earlier today." Mercer straightened. "A son? How old?" He was too scared to speak earlier but broke down tonight. The detectives exchanged a look, those smaller footprints. Within the hour, Mercer and Linda were inside a small suburban home. The boy sat on the couch, knees pulled to his chest. His mother hovered protectively behind him. Mercer knelt to eye level. "You're not in trouble. But what you saw might help us keep people safe. Just tell us what you remember." The boy swallowed hard. "I saw the girls near the dunes. They were laughing at first. Then a man came over. He said something. I don't know what. But the taller girl stepped back. The man kept looking around, then he looked at me. He pulled the blanket tighter. His eyes were wrong." "Wrong how?" Linda asked, her voice calm. "He didn't blink." Mercer felt a chill slide down his spine. "Did you see where he went?" The boy shook his head. "No. I got scared and ran home. I heard something. Footsteps behind me. Not big steps. Small ones. Like someone barefoot." Mercer's mind flashed to the faint tracks leading away from the crime scene. When they returned to the station, a new report was waiting. A fisherman had found something at the far end of the beach, buried deep in the sand. A rusted metal lunchbox containing newspaper clippings, old ones. All about missing girls from coastal towns. All unsolved. Someone had been collecting these articles. Studying them. Keeping them close. Linda exhaled sharply. This wasn't random. He's done this before. Mercer stared at the clippings laid out on the table. Dozens of names. Dozens of faces. A pattern disguised by decades. But one clipping at the bottom made his breath stop. A photo of the same beach. Same dunes. Same windswept landscape. From 30 years earlier. And written in the margin, in faded ink, were 4 words that made Mercer's skin crawl. "He walks at dusk." Detective Mercer placed the 30-year-old clipping on the table, but his fingers lingered on the faded ink. "He walks at dusk." The phrase echoed in his mind like a warning whispered across generations. Someone had been watching these dunes for decades. Studying girls who vanished. Learning the landscape like it was a hunting ground. The station lights flickered as a storm built over the coast, wind rattling the windows as if the beach itself was trying to speak. Linda spread the clippings out by timeline, creating a pattern. "Look at the intervals," she said quietly. "Every few years, a young woman goes missing along this coastline. Always near dusk. Always near dunes. But the sightings..." She tapped the earliest article. "They're inconsistent. Witnesses describe different men. Different builds. Different clothing." Mercer frowned. Copycats? Or one person changing appearance? Linda hesitated. Or something else. Some of these descriptions match men who died years before the later disappearances. It's like the identity keeps shifting. Mercer didn't like the idea. Not because it was supernatural, it wasn't. But because a person capable of blending into different eras, different communities, different eyewitness memories, was far more dangerous than a ghost story. As the storm moved in, they drove to the fisherman's shack, the location where the rusted lunchbox had been found. Rain hammered the windshield, turning the world outside into streaks of blue and gray. The beach looked different at night. Empty. Endless. A place where secrets didn't just hide, they were swallowed. The fisherman led them out behind the rocks, his lantern flickering. It was buried deep, he said. Someone didn't want it found. He pointed toward a narrow cleft between the rocks. Look there. The wind suddenly dropped, a brief unnatural stillness hanging over the place. Mercer crouched down and noticed marks in the sand, fresh ones, despite the storm. Footprints. A mixture of heavy adult steps and lighter ones. The same pattern from the crime scene. Linda snapped a photo. Who walks out here in a storm without shoes? Mercer didn't answer. His flashlight beam drifted along the rock wall and stopped. A small piece of canvas fabric was wedged into a crack. The same texture as the torn cloth from earlier. He bagged it, but when he rose, something else caught his attention. A long shape dragged through the sand, like someone had been pulling something heavy. The fisherman's voice trembled. I didn't see anyone. But last night before dawn, I heard something. Footsteps. Slow. Like someone pacing. Mercer followed the drag marks toward the dunes. The wind howled again, erasing portions of the trail, but the direction was clear, deeper into the dune fields where the girls had been found. The three of them moved cautiously through the rising sand, until the lantern light hit something half buried. A wooden door. Not to a building, there were no structures nearby, but to something below. A trapdoor. Old and weathered, reinforced with thick metal hinges. Mercer exchanged a glance with Linda. This wasn't on any coastal maps. Together, they heaved it open. The smell hit first, damp, stale air trapped underground for years. A narrow staircase descended into darkness. Linda's flashlight illuminated walls lined with newspaper clippings, missing person posters, and photographs of strangers smiling on beaches. At the center of the room was a desk. On top sat a leather journal. Mercer opened it. The most recent entry was dated 2 days before Marianne and Christine went missing. Dusk reveals the unguarded. The dunes keep their secrets. They don't hear me until it's too late. He turned another page. More entries. More dates. More names. And then the last one. 2 today. They walked too far. The quiet one noticed me first. Mercer forced down the surge of anger rising in his chest. The handwriting was careful, steady, practiced. This wasn't the work of a frantic killer. This was someone who planned. Someone who studied. Someone who had been doing this for decades. Linda whispered, "We need to find him. Now." A sound echoed from above. So, deliberate. Footsteps. On the sand. Mercer killed his flashlight. Linda did the same. The three of them stood frozen in the darkness as the footsteps moved slowly across the trapdoor above them. One heavy step, one lighter step, moving in unison. Mercer's pulse hammered as the footsteps paused directly overhead. Then the trapdoor creaked. Dust rained down. The footsteps continued, moving away, fading, until only the wind remained. Mercer climbed the stairs, but when he pushed the trapdoor open, the beach was empty. Completely empty. No figures. No shapes. No footprints. The storm had erased everything. Back at the station hours later, Mercer stared out the window as dawn approached. They had discovered his hideout. His writing. His history. But not him. And as the first light hit the coast, Linda walked in with a new report. "A girl went missing north of here," she said softly. "Just before dusk. Same pattern." Mercer closed his eyes. The case hadn't ended. It had only just begun. If you thought this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.